Hello everyone and a warm welcome to this week's episode of Ara the Autistic Alien. I'm very happy that you're here with me today. This is episode 9 and today I want to talk about the crystal caves on Alcyone, which is the main sun of the Pleiades star system, and also just some other destinations that I usually astral travel to or shamanically travel to, however you want to frame it, and get downloads, for Earth's, let's say, ascension, if we want to use that word. Although for me, I'd rather call it the natural evolution of things, like what is described by spiritual people as the ascension of Earth or 3D to 5D. To me, it's just a natural process. It's just a natural way of evolution. Yeah. So I, as a living being in this time on the planet, am an integral part of this evolution. Everything I do is evolution in action, so to speak. Okay? That's how I perceive it, or how I live it. So, because, until now, I covered a lot of topics surrounding systemical violence and human conditioning. And so the reason why I actually started to journey to other planets that I lived there before, so I knew that there were certain areas where you could go for healing or for transformation. And the reason why I chose that is because for let's say the past 34 years, or 33, I think it happened around 1 year ago. The past 33 years, I was when I was really devastated because things went really wrong in my life sometimes. I always cried out please take me home. I just want to go home. Please let me die. I don't want to be here anymore. I really don't want to be on Terra anymore. And around 1 year ago, my spirit started to reply to that with, why don't you take your home to you? Why don't you bring what you miss to Terra? And that really hit home hard when they said that, because that was a new perspective that I never looked at. And I was like, wow, okay, how can I do that? And because before, I focused all my work also on deconditioning of that human aspect to be fully human. But it was very hard at times also because there is not so many good role models anymore. Systemical violence really took its toll on our society. All the books that were burned by the church, and then the books that were burned by Hitler and the Nazis and everyone, there was so much information lost. And right now we are retrieving it, of course, because it can never be truly lost, right? It's stored in our DNA and it's stored in the DNA of Terra. But still, there was this aspect of, okay, where can I find new downloads that are more pure, that are not as distorted? Because if you look, I just take this as a very quick example. If you look at religions nowadays, they are very distorted, I believe, from what the prophets who kind of founded these religions actually were doing and saying and living. And that's simply because man got in the middle. Conditioned man got in the middle. So when all of the world is kind of still conditioned in systemical violence, even the one that are really liberated, there is some kind of systemical violence within them. Yeah, because it's just if you say that you don't have any of it within you, then you most probably have a lot of it in you. We are talking about white privilege, we are talking about racism, we are talking about discrimination, we talk about stereotypes, and that's just super normal. It's our brain's way of filtering so much information. 200 years ago, a human was not exposed to as much information as we are today. So our brains didn't really develop a strategy to filter a lot of information. So when they suddenly, through the industrialization and the advanced technology, suddenly we're exposed to so much information. What the brain did was it stereotyped. And it's just a coping mechanism of the brain. And we need to find a better coping mechanism for the brain, because somehow we didn't really adjust ourselves and our own chemistry and our own organical system to the changes that we created on the outside. And that's why technology is now further than we are. It's just because we forgot about ourselves in the process. So when people say they don't have any systemical violent conditioning inside of them, that just can't be, because that's how your brain works, okay? And like, even if you decondition it for a long time, there will still be some. And then your kids will have less and less, if we do that path. But it's not something that can be done in one lifetime. I don't believe so, yeah? Because I would consider myself a very open and liberated being and deconditioned as well, but I still have these stereotypes. And as long as I don't come into a situation where the stereotype is triggered, I am not really aware of it. I can only work with it once it's triggered. And that's why it takes several lifetimes, yeah, because you need a certain amount of time to have all the things triggered, yeah. So what I wanted to do is just find role models that were outside of Terra. Find places where I could download things that were not distorted by conditioned man and his thinking. Like, for example, when humans are afraid, they change things, because when we are afraid, we want to control. That's when we are afraid. It's the opposite of trust. So when we're afraid, we want to control. And that's very natural. That's also a way how our brain works. It's supernatural. And so when a prophet gives a very liberating speech, which is actually super deconditioned and everything, and then it gets written down. That's why the Celtic people didn't write things down, because once you write them down, they can be manipulated. Today, we think that script does not get manipulated, but things that get passed down by speech do get manipulated, and that is not true. And I tell you why. Because when you pass something down by speech, and you pass it down in all the tribes' families, yeah, then you can be sure that at least one true version will remain. Maybe there will be some that have different things and everything, but usually when you pass it down through orally, that's when, I'm a storyteller, yeah? So when I script a podcast like now, when I want to tell a story, I just know what I want to tell. I don't know how I'm going to tell it. I just know the meaning. I know what kind of message the story wants to pass on. I don't necessarily need to know all the details about the story. I just need to know what metaphor was used and what meaning wanted to be put across. Okay? If you write something down, you nail it down to that exact thing. And then maybe if somebody is in fear and they just look at the superficial and not the meta level of the story, they will just change the story. So maybe the metaphor is still the same, but the message is not the same anymore. I hope I'm being clear here. I know it's a big thing to grasp, because for me it was also when I realized that, it was massive for me, because I like to write, right? But then I realized that no, when I write it, it's put in one way, and when I say it, I can kind of also change the way I tell it according to who is listening. Yeah. So if I know I want to bring this metaphor across, which has a beautiful meaning that maybe helps one of my clients, but I know that they have ADHD, then I know that I can use a very short version of the story. Yeah. That maybe leaves out some things that just are not important to give over the message, the meaning, the meta level. And if I know that somebody is really like sad and needs some inspiration and would love to hear a beautiful story, I can stretch it out. Yeah, because it's about the meta level. And when I write a book, it has to suit or match so many people in one setting. Plus, it really depends on for who I write it. Yeah, like my book Being Human, now when I read it, I feel like I wrote it for aliens because it's very dry for like humans. Yeah, and I feel like for every chapter I could do another book just about that chapter, because I didn't really dive deep into the matter, but that was simply because I wanted to describe the whole journey of being human and what happens in this journey. Yeah, and so I realized that, okay, maybe it would be good to like write new smaller books just about it, like each of the chapters, to like translate it more into a human form, because now I kind of more wrote a book for aliens to understand humans better and how they work at the moment, and where we are at as a civilization at the moment on this planet. And I feel like for humans there could be way more information that like is also more emotional, because what I also like, some parts of it are very, very emotional, but like the parts where I explain things, they are not that emotional. So they're very rational and very down to the point, because that's how I like to receive information. But that's not necessarily how everyone likes to receive information. So yeah, but let's go back to the point. Today I wanted to talk to you about where I get like other inspiration from, or like other downloads, like self-love and self-worth, when they're not from Terra. So they're not like gone through some kind of conditioning. And every month I do a Risa with the members of my Enzo Ilia community. It's like a monthly subscription where you profit from a lot of my knowledge. And we also do a monthly Risa together. And this is very new, and I wasn't really sure where I would go first. But then I realized, okay, I definitely want to go like outside of Terra with the people, and just really get downloads from outside like I do for myself. And so, as I maybe have mentioned before, like the place where I stayed for a long time before I reincarnated on Earth is Alcyone. It's the main sun of the Pleiadic star system, and it's a very, very beautiful place. It's very difficult to describe it in human words, but I will try. So on Alcyone, or like in the Pleiades altogether, matter is not as fixated as it is on Earth. So that means that things can shift. So there is one place where it's actually very close to where I lived. It's called the Crystal Caves of Alcyone, and it's actually this huge amethyst massive, mountain massive, and there are like caves inside this amethyst massive, and in these caves there are like round bowls in the ground. They look like baths, yeah? And so all the crystal that they are, like everything is made from amethyst, because it's cut into this mountain of amethyst. But because matter is not fixated, and we on the Pleiades are very good in manipulating energy, in the baths, like for example, if you go there, and now for this Risa I wanted to start with self-love and self-worth. So I can program over my mind that the holes in the ground change the crystal they are in. Yeah. So for this Risa, I programmed them to be rose quartz and granite. And for others, like for example, when I go there and I need, like, let's say, more joy of life, I would change them to citrine. or like you can change them to any kind of crystal. You could also change them to water or any kind of element that we have on the Pleiades. Yeah, it's like really you can manipulate matter there just because it's not as fixated as here. So to speak, it's more easy to access the quantum level because everything is more on the quantum level per se. So, and yeah, so I really hope you can picture that because it's so beautiful. Like I will try to convey the picture via this sound, the sound of my voice, because it's, yeah, it's just very beautiful. It's very sensual and very etherical at the same time. And like these crystal caves are actually like my main travel spot to go to, just because I think because I am Pleiadian and I know how to use them. So I think I told you before that I also really love to sing and I really love to use the power of my voice. And the power of sound is also integrated into these baths. Actually, they're called sound baths as well, because crystal sings. Normally, we can't hear it because it's on a frequency that we cannot perceive with human ears. But on other planets, you can perceive it. Or like I feel like even some certain animals on Earth or Terra can perceive it as well. So in the caves of Alcyone, you really hear the crystal singing because it also echoes with the amethyst walls of the caves. And these frequencies are really beautiful to change certain structures within the astral body, because when I like astral travel, I usually do that with Unat, that's my spaceship, and Elro, which is like my first commander, so to speak. He's Pleiadian as well. And like we pick up everyone that wanted to be a part of the Risa in their astral body form. So I think I told that before, but I'm not sure. So we have the aura of the human, and it has the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, and the astral body. And the thing that gets reincarnated, if you choose so, or like travels life of the life of the life between dimensions, is the astral body and the chi or consciousness that resides within it. And the physical, emotional, and mental bodies, they are on Terra only. Yeah. So I travel there, like to the caves of Alcyone, with all the passengers that subscribe to this journey, because when they give me their okay to travel with me, I can like kind of pick them up, and it's really like kind of beaming them up into my spaceship. And of course this all works over visualization, so it's very valid for people to say, oh, this is only imagination. But the thing is that society today really undervalues the worth of imagination and the power of imagination, because everything you can imagine is real. You know, and that's from Pablo Picasso. You really have to let that word sink in. Everything you can imagine is real. And that's true. It's true on a quantum level. It's true on an energetic level. If you can imagine it, it's happening somewhere. It's in some kind of parallel universe. It's somewhere out there. Otherwise, you could not imagine it. So even if you say, oh, Dara, maybe you only imagine that. Yeah, maybe I only imagine that, but it's not an only. Because I imagine that, and for that it's true. For that it is happening. That I imagine it is actually the security that it is happening. Yeah? And I know that's really hard to grasp. So maybe you want to do an exercise with you that I have like from one of my favorite teachers. It's Marissa Peer. She does a lot of hypnotherapy. So what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes and you just sit down and you relax. And you imagine that you hold a lemon in your hand. And this lemon is cut in a half. Yeah, so it has in a fourth. This lemon is cut in a fourth. So it has the perfect size to just bite inside it. Yeah? So now I want you still have your eyes closed. You just sit here and you have your hand like in front of your face, and you really imagine that there is a lemon inside of that hand. And you hold it, and then you put your hand to your mouth, and you really vividly imagine how you take a bite of that lemon, how you bite into it full-heartedly. And now you do that. Now, who has more saliva in their mouth than they had before the visualization? Usually when I do this in classes, everyone. So if you don't have it, then maybe you are the exception that confirms the rule. But this is a very good exercise to show you how strongly imagination affects the body. You had a physical reaction to your imagination. So how can imagination not be healing? Yeah? It had a physical effect. I still have more saliva in my mouth than I had before, because my mouth was sure that I will bite into a lemon because I visualized it. And we see that with the training of like very, very successful sports people, like people that get paid millions and win the Olympics and everything. You know what they do? When they train, let's say for a marathon, yeah? They train for the marathon physically, let's say 8 hours a day, I don't know. And then in the evening, when they go home, they don't watch Netflix. They watch how they run a marathon from the eye perspective. Yeah, so they had a camera on during the day, and then in the evening they watch what they ran. And it's simply because even if it's only imagined, for the brain, it's real. Yeah? It doesn't matter if you watch it or do it. For the brain, it's the same. So the brain will learn, even only through watching it on a TV, more focus during that. And it will have the feeling of having even more exercise and more perfection in that. Yeah? So the power of imagination is real. And the healing power of that is even more real. So that's just to cover like any doubters, because like I totally believe it. Like also, you don't have to believe what I say. Yeah, that's very important to me. To me, everyone has their own experience of life and their own perception of life, and I'm just here sharing my perception because I'm interested in how other people maybe perceive things. But it's not about me being right and you being wrong or anything like that, okay? It's just like also what we found out in hypnotherapy, what we found out in studying the mind. And even like if you do a mind master training that CEOs and like stuff, people like that do, it will be about that. That what you suggest to be real to yourself will become reality. Yeah? So what is real is actually what you choose to be real and what you choose to have an influence on you. Or let's better said, everything has an influence on you. And consciousness is there to actually steer what influence you want to have and what influence you don't want to have. Yeah? Okay. So, when I picked everyone up with Unat and Elro, we actually start at the root of Yggdrasil, because this is like a kind of Celtic shamanism. Yeah, it's called the Way of the Weird. I was initiated into that in 2018. And we travel from the roots of the Yggdrasil to the 9th branch. And the inside of the Yggdrasil actually looks a lot like a wormhole. So it's really funny because it's like beaming yourself through space. And then we travel to the 9th branch of the tree because that's where the Pleiades are. And then we travel to that further branch where Alcyone is. And then we arrive at the crystal caves. And because I think almost every human being alive at the moment had an incarnation on the Pleiades already, they, like everyone that is traveling with me, is awaited by their Pleiadian counterpart and like guided to the crystal caves. And then we usually do 30 minutes of recalibration and transformation because everyone has their own bath, their own bubble where they can lie down and really relax into the experience. And during that, I record some frequencies and light language that I send to the passengers after the ride is finished, so they can really integrate what has happened there afterwards. And it really has a super strong effect. So that's one place I really like to travel to. And as I said, it's the one I go to the most often. But then there are like, how could you call that? I usually call them the fluff caves. The fluff caves are on Venus, and I'm not sure how accurate that is, but like, yeah, I can give them the name I want. Yeah, so you can imagine that they are like pink clouds, glittering pink clouds, in a very sensual way. And it's like this cloud mountain, I would say. And inside there are caves as well. And they also have these holes where you can lie inside. And matter is also not fixated. So actually you can change the elementary structure of the clouds with your thinking. Yeah. So you can simply say, okay, I want a cloud for that. And it works over color magic, or color therapy, however you want to call it. So they just change the color of the cloud bubble you're in. And through that frequency will be put into your astral body. And after that, you can travel back home, and you can also integrate that into the physical realm of Earth. Then another place I really like to go to is the Syrian water baths. They are underwater, and they are actually like very close to the home of Soma, which is a whale that lives on Sirius, which is very strong, very, very strong entity. And they are underwater, but they also look like caves, and the caves are made from coral. But it's very soft coral, yeah? And it's also not coral that could be destroyed by an astral body lying inside of it. So there are like these coral bubbles inside of these coral caves underwater. And there a lot of water therapy is done. Yeah, I do a lot of my emotional stuff or workings I do there. Because it has a lot of like, I have this beautiful recording of a light language of Soma of a friend of mine. And I listen to that, and I'm in these caves, and it's just so amazing, and it really recovers me. And I feel like maybe because when I like think of Terra, there are so many like bad news in my mind also about like the ecosystems and how everything is doing, that sometimes I feel that maybe I also bring these frequencies that I find there back here. And also like every time I do that and I travel there and I come back, I really give these frequencies also into Terra to heal her, and maybe to remind whole humanity that we could have like a different life on this planet if we would put into more consideration what we are doing with matter in general. Yeah. And then like another place I really like to go to is Mars. There are like the fire caves of Mars, and they are in this like it's like a desert stone, like this very red stone, but it's actually fossilized trees. So these were very, very big trees once, and they were like burned to the ground, or like because there was this apocalypse happening on Mars, right? And they like fossilized. That's the right word, yeah. They fossilized, and the place I go to is kind of this like mountain of these fossilized trees, I would say. It's very red, but you can still see some like, of the inside of trees shapes in the fossil or in the stone. And there are actually caves also in this stone, or bubbles for each passenger or traveler that ends up there, that work with fire and the transformational aspects of fire and the healing of fire. And also there you can work with the power of the stone and the fire, and you can actually tell the fire what you are working on, and it will work on this part. So that's where I go when I want to work on my mental body. And Sirius is where I go when I want to work on my emotional body, or also Venus. And when I want to work on my astral body, I always go to the Pleiades, because that's just the most matching. And when I want to work on my physical body, I actually go to the caves of Terra, because yes, Terra also has caves. And they are actually in the center. It's like the magma center of Earth. You can imagine that there are caves inside this very hot center, and they have a lot of life force. Yeah, like a lot of life joy, a lot of saying yes to being fully embodied, being fully physical. And they are in the core, the magmatic core of Terra. Yeah. And they are like also, how to say that? That's really hard to describe in words. Because it's not really like a cave. It's more that you jump into that like big bubble that magmatic core is. And then you just let like the magma flow everything through your physical body. Like you imagine that you're there with your physical body after you have traveled through your roots down into the core of Earth. And you can really transform a lot of things about the physical body there. Like that's also something I work with when I do shamanic transformations or other sessions. So what I actually shared with you is just shamanic knowledge. You know, most shamans I know don't really talk about the starseed aspect of their work, or they don't really talk about the planetary or cosmic aspect of their work because it's too far out there. They prefer to talk about the directions and about spirits that maybe are more graspable for humans at the moment. And like for sure I also work with fairies and dwarves and like a lot of stuff that maybe is more approachable to humans, or even with buffaloes and animals, you know, like spirit animals. I work a lot with that. But I feel like there is so much coverage on that it's maybe not that interesting for other people. Or like there is so much information on that already that I prefer to cover those aspects, especially because, you know, these things are not conditioned yet. So, like, if you want to go there, I can teach you how, or you learn to astral project with somebody else, and then you can go there. And if, like, your teacher that teaches you to astral project or shamanically travel, or however you want to call it, like, for sure, shamanically traveling does more of the healing aspect, and it's like it has a bigger impact because the shaman is trained in a lot of things, yeah, but still you can do that while astral projecting yourself. Not everything, but some of it. And like if the teacher that you have is a good one, he will not condition you to in telling you exactly how these worlds are, but he will just show you how you get there, or teach you, reveal the wisdom you already have inside of you, how to get there, and then you can get there by yourself. And you can have your own perception of what is there. And I think that's very beautiful. Because when I work with an animal, I always have like, there is a stereotype inside of me about a cat. There is a stereotype inside of me about a buffalo. And that's very good because in shamanism, we work with a lot of archetypes. Yeah. But then also there is a lot of maybe not so good conditioning in that, because all the information you have ever received about buffaloes will be in that working. And for me, I prefer to have like these cosmic things, as like my guide said, bring your home to Earth. Don't try to make yourself at home on Terra by cutting all of that off. Find ways to bring it here. Yeah. So yeah, that's like what I'm doing with Enzo Ilia and also with this podcast and everything I do. Yeah. So I really hope, I'm sorry, my voice is still not that good. I think you felt it, but I hope it was okay. And yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. And again, like this is like not something that I say is true for everyone or perceivable for everyone, but it can be imagined, so it's true. And I really loved that thought, and it made me understand so much more about the workings of the universe once I understood and deeply integrated that everything I can imagine is real. Yeah. Okay. I wish you a lovely, lovely, lovely week ahead. And thank you so much for listening. And I can't wait for next week and episode 10 already. Hey! Sending you much love and a big hug. And thank you so much for your attention and care. Bye bye.